What is up, America? Welcome to the Off the Ball Network. This is the college football playoff rankings overreaction show. This is the initial release for the 2023 college football playoffs. It's October 31st, 2023. It's Halloween, and what a better time for me to come back like my man Michael Myers, like my man Jason Voorhees. I'm back from the dead. Jeff Needs Sports is back. I'm with my man Mo Murphy, the OG of one of the OGs, the Off the Ball Network, and we're ready to talk some more college football and how everybody on the planet hates the Ohio State Buckeyes. Mo, what is up?
Nothing much. Like I told you before the show, I mean, first off, I guess the welcome back, we're bringing back Jeff Needs Sports and everything. And this is what you've done.
I should have pulled a little thriller. I should have pulled a little thriller dance when I came back.
But yeah. And then I actually just saw the rankings right before taking the kids trick or treating and stuff. Wasn't able. So everything that I'm saying is genuine. I've not heard what ESPN has to say about rankings in certain teams, so I don't know how they determine everybody's where. So everything that I'm saying is just from the simple fact of looking at the initial rankings.
This is great. Okay, so Mo, you're also my producer tonight, and I appreciate it. If you would pop up the screen for us, we'll go through with the audience. We'll kind of count down through the. We'll get down to where we like. I think we'll get down to 20 because I think we'll just go through the 25 real quick. But I know at number 20. You got some bones to pick, and then we're going to get into the contenders. So, there's no surprise here. Number 1 was Ohio State. We're going to get here, everybody. Oh, don't overreact yet. Number 2, Georgia. Number 3, Michigan. Number 4, Florida State. 5, Washington. 6, Oregon. 7, Texas. 8, Alabama. 9, Oklahoma. 10, Ole Miss. Let me scroll through some more here. And then we got 11 Penn State, 12 Missouri, 13 Louisville, 14 LSU, 15 Notre Dame, 16 Oregon State, 17 Tennessee, 18 Utah, 19 UCLA, 20 USC. We'll go ahead and round out the top 25. I say all these because if you're out there listening, you're just listening for your team, it might catch it. I know there's a lot of information. 21 Kansas, 22 Oklahoma State, 23 Kansas State, 24 Tulane, and 25 my Air Force Fighting Falcons. Glad to see it. They deserved it. They've had a great season. They've got a chance. We won't get into it tonight. It'll be later in the year. We'll see how it goes. They've got a chance to make a New Year's Day bowl game, which is fantastic. So that's where we got. So first question, Mo. Let's just go through some things. You just saw this for the first time. I can scroll anywhere you want. I know there's a team that stood out to you. You might want to talk about it right now, but let's just talk about what jumped out to us before we get to the nuts and bolts of this thing.
USC being at 20.
Okay.
They got 2 losses. They don't have a good win on their schedule. Who have they beat? Me saying that, it'll be we'll touch on why that matters anyway when we get to the higher part, the top 10 and all that, because obviously your strength of wins or lack thereof is why certain teams are in certain places. But they're a 2-loss team, and I know what they can't do is project, because at the end of the day, I don't see them being ranked here in a couple weeks anyway. Don't project, but they already have 2 losses. They're not a good team. They don't have a good win. They barely beat Colorado, who we've watched get stomped. They barely beat an Arizona team who might actually be good, but other than that, they don't have a good win while also having 2 losses. Utah has a good win, Tennessee has a good win, Oregon State has a good win, Notre Dame has a good win, Kansas. That's what I'm saying. But these 2-loss teams, they all have good wins, and they're sitting here. USC doesn't even have one, and I know some of those teams are ahead of them, but I really am surprised USC's ranked.
That's true. If USC was almost any other school in the country, if they were Colorado, Colorado probably, that's a bad example, but yeah, I agree with that. Utah only 2 spots ahead of them after we just saw it. Of course, I know it was a close game. That's probably fair. Tennessee, these are all the 2-loss teams here. Kansas, US, they're kind of in a group of 2-loss teams. Now, let's talk about a 2-loss team first before we get too deep into it. Before I get to my first question, I'm giving Mo time to digest this as we kind of break this down. So we're kind of dipping our toes in the water here. The best 2-loss team, or the highest ranked 2-loss team, I should say, LSU right now. They got Alabama coming up Saturday. They're at 14. I have LSU as my lowest ranked team that has a realistic chance to make the playoff because of they still have the chance If they win out, they're going to beat Alabama and Georgia. That means they're going to the playoff. I'm sorry, like it just is. It just is. They've played, really good. Their losses are weird. They've got a loss against as of right now, a top 4 team in Florida State. So I think LSU is my cutoff for like teams that can make it in, and that's it. That's at 14. What do you think about that? LSU 2-loss teams, and who is your lowest team that you think can still make the playoffs?
I think it goes down. I'm with you. It goes all the way down to LSU. Notre Dame hurts themselves already having 2 losses and not playing in a conference championship, so they won't be able to have that in their back pocket. LSU is an SEC team, so they're gonna, if they win out, they have that in their back pocket. We thought we had the same conversation with LSU last year, where like we thought if they had beat Georgia, do they get in as a 2-loss team as well as Georgia, and is it essentially end up looking where it could have been LSU, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan? Like, would the committee do that? I think we could have the same conversation, towards the end of the season as well. And I mean, you look at, like I said, with Notre Dame and then Oregon State and all those other 2-loss, like a 2-loss Pac-12 conference champion's not getting in.
No. And I would say, as far as we talk about Louisville, like, everybody, like if you're looking, or if you just know Louisville's 7-1, here's the problem. The ACC is just not good enough. If LSU wins out, they're going to jump Louisville. You're not like, if they beat Alabama this week, they're going to jump Louisville. I'm sorry. Like Louisville's having a good season, but an ACC, they're the highest ranked ACC team, by the way, which is not
Florida State.
Well, yeah, of course, Florida State. I'm sorry. Outside of the next one's down, but Florida State's great, but it just, I don't think they have enough considering what LSU has to go. Now, that being said, I also don't think LSU is going to do that. I think they can beat Alabama, and then we have to have a real conversation.
But I think it could be the same result and lose to Georgia.
I think a year from now, LSU is in good shape. As of now, I still have them in my lowest out. So another team, Missouri, it's they're having a really good season. They're playing really good. They got the wins. They got Georgia coming up. So here's what I would say about teams like Missouri at number 12. You have your shot. Like you just go beat Georgia. Like, I know it's impossible to say because nobody's done it, and I believe it's up to 26 or 27 games now. But here's the thing: you've got your shot. You're ranked 12 in the country, and the playoff rankings, the ones that matter. We no longer. I don't know about you. I don't care about the AP.
They don't matter once these drop. Like, once
it really doesn't matter.
From here on out, only thing that matters is every Tuesday when they come out.
And what the committee has said, we'll get to the bigger picture. I know we're rushing through this, but there's a lot to digest, and we've got about 3 days before everything changes in the college football world. So I know Mo's got some trick-or-treat candy he's going to get into. I know he's already picked his candies out. Like, as the kids are putting it in there, he's like, yes, Dad.
Yeah, that's mine. Yep, that's mine right there.
Y'all talk about this. We're gonna talk about it. So Missouri, here's what I'd say. I would say, I also asked you a question that said who got helped the best. I'm gonna say Missouri. I think Missouri at 12 with Georgia coming up, it got put in a great position. I think the playoff committee said, we're going to give you every opportunity to make the playoffs, even though we would not, a team like Missouri, especially without having the blue blood name and everything. So I think Missouri probably got I won't say favorable, they've earned it, but I think Missouri's in one of the best positions of the teams that we didn't think were going to be here at the beginning of the season. Anybody that stands out as far as like, you're in better shape than I thought you would be.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I agree with you. I've actually watched Missouri a lot, like every Saturday this year, which is something I never thought I would do. I never thought I'd be sitting here watching football. They got a really good quarterback. They got a really good offense. They got one of the best wide receivers in the country. That's kind of like under the radar, not being talked about in that upper echelon with the Marvin Harrisons and Colemans and neighbors from LSU. Like, he's not in that same conversation because not everybody's sitting there watching Missouri on a Saturday. And then you pop up and you're like, oh my God, Missouri is number 12. Like, and they played Georgia Saturday, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes, this Saturday.
They play Georgia Saturday. They have their chance. What I would like to see is if they were to win, where does that put them next week? Like, because now you arguably have what you would essentially have the best win in the country. You have me as the bottom, like I'm one of the last 1-loss teams ranked. Does that beating Georgia, does that get you up to, you pass Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and Penn State, and probably Oregon as well. I would assume
would jump,
put them the best one-loss team essentially.
Yeah, they would jump. Oh man, it's tough because here's the issue. I like this Missouri conversation. I think this is one of the most important conversations we can have. So we're going to stick on this for a second because this is what this committee does. They told us you didn't get a chance to watch it. I watched the interview with the committee chairman afterwards, and his one statement, one takeaway was every week they start from scratch. So by that, they're saying, if Missouri wins this weekend, next week they ought to jump way up there. If you're really honestly telling me that they start from scratch, that's what you're saying. So, but we've also we haven't seen this in the playoff era, is like an early dominant team like a Georgia, Ohio State. These teams, really Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama have always been kind of way at the top early in the rankings and kind of always been there. We haven't seen one of them go down, early in the rankings. So there's really not a lot of precedence for what they do. They got two choices. They can say Georgia wasn't as good as we thought. We put too much bank in the Georgia game or the Florida game, blah, blah, blah. Or they can say Missouri's the number 5, 6 team in the country. I would have a hard time putting Missouri ahead of Oregon right now. But if they do topple Georgia, it will be interesting. And again, this is all hypothetical, but this is why we do the show.
But think about it. Like, it'd be crazy to think, like, if Missouri beats Georgia, it'd be crazy to be like, oh, Missouri jumps to 6. But they set the precedent. No, of course, I would think so. They have the best way. You set the precedent because Texas is ahead of Oklahoma. They played head to head.
All good point.
Oklahoma beat Texas. So you've already value wins, and you think Texas's win on the road in Tuscaloosa weighs and is more important than their close loss in the Red River rivalry against Oklahoma.
Yep.
So you're valuing the fact that Texas lost to an Oklahoma team, one loss, but you're valuing your win on the road in Tuscaloosa as saying that the quality of win matters. If I'm not mistaken, the game's at Georgia as well.
Yeah.
So Missouri on the road beating the number 2 team in the country, like, you would at least, you're basically saying out of all the one-loss teams, you'd have to value it by Texas and anybody behind them at the very least.
That's
like, even if Alabama won this week and beat LSU, I know they're already ahead of Missouri, but you're basically saying because Texas beat Alabama on the road, they are ranked ahead of everybody except that has one loss except Oregon, and that's because Oregon got in a dogfight with the number 5 team, barely lost, and they've looked like one of the best teams in the country amongst that.
And Oregon dominating Utah, got a lot of credit for them. We'll kind of climb up here, but I like where you're going with this, and I think that's a good point. So another question I ask you, and it sounds like we're on the same page here, is the overall message from the committee was we're going to give you credit for winning games, and I think they should. And not only because I'm a Ohio State fan, we're going to have the Ohio State conversation here in a second. By the way, go to Up in Flames. Me and Mo just did a great hour on the if you're an Ohio State fan, the future of the Ohio State season a couple days ago, but we're going to talk. And so what they said was, we're going to give you credit for going and playing tough games and winning games rather than just the loss column. You know me at the network, how many times we talk about, I'm like, nothing matters but the loss column. Now I stand by that. When it gets to the end of the season, this committee always chickens out and goes with the loss column. They like what I would love to see them do is when the first rankings come out, the records be 1-0. 2-0 or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like, then really forget about the loss column, like start from scratch right here. And then it would really change the directory of it, because there's going to be a team that had a bad loss, like Texas. It's going to be so hard to get past that one loss. Oregon, hard to get past that one loss, even though they're getting close to doing that. When it comes down to it, you and I both know that it's going to come down the loss column, we think. But what they said this week was your wins matter.
Yeah, so they've made it pretty loud and clear that your wins matter.
Yeah, so far. So I want to talk about one team real quick. We don't have to beat this one into the ground. This team, Penn State's at 11. And, if you're, I don't know, if you're not really like dialed in like me and Mo, or you don't really care about this stuff as much as we do, Penn State actually really controls their fate. If Penn State beats Michigan and we're assuming that doesn't lose another game, and they beat Michigan, they're guaranteed the spot in the Big Ten championship game because of tiebreakers, regardless of what Ohio State does. It's well, assuming Ohio State, I guess
That's
that's right.
assuming Ohio State
If
loses.
Ohio State loses, I shouldn't assume that. I said this
Yeah.
the other day. Mo, correct me. But Penn State, if they beat Michigan, is really puts themselves in a good position. So, like at 11, they need help from I guess they need help from Michigan, but they need help from Ohio State to lose. However you want to look at it, Penn State's not in too bad a position at 11, but it's also one of those things like you got one game to win, and then you got to sit and wait and see what happens on November 25th. So at 11, Penn State is kind of where they are. They're really, they're all they can do is win out and then hope for a loss. But 11 is a little like it really doesn't matter. Ole Miss, again, they still have Alabama left on the schedule, I believe. I don't know their whole schedule, but I think
They
Ole
lost
Miss
to Alabama, I think, already.
so they already played Bama. Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. They already lost to
They
Bama.
got
So
Georgia.
they got Georgia. They got a
Georgia.
shot at Georgia. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know. I'm playing it fast and loose here. That's right, because I picked them to beat Bama, and they did not. But that's regardless. At 10, they're in great shape. If you're top 10 and you're in the SEC, you're going to get credit. If you can, I don't with Ole Miss, I think their issue is I wish Walker was here to tell me this, but I don't think they can get in the SEC championship game if them and Alabama win out. I think that kind of screws things up.
I think they would lose an outright tiebreaker.
They would lose a tiebreaker. So that's a team that actually like Penn State's kind of in Penn State, Ole Miss, kind of the same position. Oklahoma's in a weird position. They're still in the running to get a shot at Texas in the Big 12 championship game. They're in pretty good shape. The meat of their schedule is kind of like Oklahoma State's going to be a good, a decent win if they can get through that. They're not in bad shape, but I think that they're going to get the least benefit of the doubt coming later in the season.
You know what's weird about Alabama though is like when you actually think about it, Alabama could lose Saturday and still go play in the SEC championship game.
Yes.
Think about because their only loss is a non-conference
to Texas.
Yep. So, and then if they lose to LSU, now you're talking about LSU's in the same boat. Now they can't lose, but if they win and Ole Miss wins out, like it could get real weird on that side of the SEC. Even if you're like, oh, well, they got 2 losses and Ole Miss doesn't lose out. But because Alabama don't have, like Alabama could lose a game and still probably win the tiebreaker over Ole Miss, or it becomes a 3-way tie and it becomes really weird. Like there's a way where that side of the SEC could get really weird.
Here's what's crazy. So now we're getting to the real meat and potatoes. We just talked about Alabama. Alabama just needs they win every game. That means they're going to beat Georgia. We're assuming, or they're going to win the SEC championship. We'll say it's Missouri. Either team. That means they're still in pretty good shape. Washington or Oregon will have been knocked. Somebody's going to be eliminated by then, or not. Both of those aren't going to. But what's weird, and again, this happens every year. There's really, if you really look at it, you got Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State at the top. I don't think anybody sees Florida State losing. I'm not saying they can't lose, but like we don't project a loss in Florida State in the ACC. So we're giving them that. We're giving Michigan or Ohio State a spot. Like that, I think we all agree that one of those two teams is probably going at this minute. If not, honestly, if not Penn State. Like if you want to jump down to there, one of those Big Ten teams going.
I could see a Big Ten team not going if it's not one of Ohio State or Michigan.
Possible, but as of right now, I think we all think that we would be shocked if Ohio State or Michigan both don't go.
Right. I mean, we think the winner of that game at the end of the year.
And then so we assume that Georgia's as good as we think they are, and they're going to get in again this year. Even so, I guess here's a question what I'm trying to figure out is how many spots are actually open, because if we're assuming Florida State, one of the Big Ten teams, and then I can't imagine SEC team not making it, even if it's not Georgia, like whether it's LSU, Alabama, or Georgia. So really, like we got Washington, Oregon, Texas, Oklahoma, all these teams from, those conferences beating each other up. Only one of them can make it.
One spot.
Only really one spot. And I know it's crazy to say this early, but it's just how it is. And we've seen this play out. Like, it seems like you look at all these teams, you're like, oh, you got a chance. Like, like Oregon and Washington, like that. I mean, Oregon, I think Washington, something about that team makes me think they're going to lose. I don't know what it is.
They've come close ever since beating Oregon.
We touched on them Field Stormers. There's just something that makes me think that like they can give one up and they're a field goal away from being eliminated. They are a good team. Don't get me wrong. I think Oregon's a better team right now than Washington. I don't really care about the wins or losses, but it just either like there's not as many spots open because of and again because of Michigan's schedule, because Ohio State's already played the two big, hiccups in their schedule. Not saying a team can't get upset, but I'm saying like when you circled the season, it was Notre Dame, it was Penn State, it was Michigan. Like that, they had to get through that. They had to get through Madison. They've done all that. If they have a hiccup at Rutgers or something, that's something we can't control. These are things that you can't predict. So like, Ohio State, also has the highest percentage chance to get in, by Vegas and everything else, which I think's a little nuts. But there's not as many spots open as people think. And I think there's a few of these teams, like I think Texas and Oklahoma, both of them are actually in worse shape than people think. I really do. Unless one of them just catches on fire, because they both kind of stumbled the last few weeks. Quinn Ewers is dinged up right now. I haven't heard if he's coming back or not. It's college sports. So like Oklahoma, when Oklahoma took that loss, I think everybody was ready to write off like Oklahoma and Dylan Gabriel as to like they're not real contenders. So I think that really hurt them in the eyes of everybody, taking that loss, even though Kansas is a really good football team. So I don't think there's as many openings as people think there are.
No, there's not, and there never is. Like,
right.
Because it's like when you really think about it, like from a Big Ten team gonna get in, an SEC team gonna get in.
Yeah.
This year you don't have Clemson, so but Florida State kind of takes that spot that they've been good enough. They're even though the conference is weak, that's how Clemson. But you just got to dominate. You just got to dominate. And you got to have the playmakers on the wearing your jersey, and you'll get in. And so Florida State has that. They got a top-notch quarterback, one of the best wide receivers. So they won't blink and be like, we really don't want you in because you play in the ACC and da-da-da. And they might not be able to avoid it if they went out.
Right.
Anyways. It's always interesting to see the first two out and seeing that one of the five teams of Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Florida State, and Washington, one of them had to be number 5. Thing about it is, if you're the committee, you feel, hey, okay, if the playoffs started today, Washington wouldn't be in. But guess what? Ohio State plays Michigan. We know it's inevitable. We know that it's going to happen at the end of the year. That part will work itself out. The only thing is, I'm still a little nervous if I'm Washington, because you can't. If I'm Washington or Oregon, I'm a little nervous because the committee has also shown. Let's say Ohio State lose a close one to Michigan, like real close, or let's say Michigan lose a close one to Ohio State, and I think based on strength of schedule, I think Michigan would get knocked more by losing and not sneak in there without winning the conference. But we've seen Ohio State could sneak in there without winning the conference, especially because they still would have the Penn State and the Notre Dame wins in their back pocket. So I'd be a little weary of whoever being 5th, but then it being the Pac-12. Like, if it was Florida State, I'd be like, I'm not worried about it. But the Pac-12, they seem to be the team that just hardly ever finds their way into that playoff mix. They always the first ones out, not last.
And which is crazy because they've been one of the, I think, the most competitive conference this year. But we saw it happen last year. I think Utah honestly deserved a shot to get in there. But again, who do you leave out? The Pac-12 got left out, and I think right now so this sounds crazy, but I think Oregon has a better shot to get in. I think voters and the committee, everybody actually likes Oregon a little more than Washington. Just because of like you said, Washington almost loses every week. There's a focus there.
Dan Lanning, like they're loving that, like he's a possible coach of the year candidate kind of guy. So
and then they both got chances to show off the next few. I would imagine. I think they both play USC still, right? Both of them still have USC.
Still
they're both going to mash USC, so it's going to be how much credit. If one of them, if USC hangs with one of these teams, that's probably going to be the difference. They're probably going to flip flop. Just because I think USC at 20, like you said, it doesn't really make any sense. It's just because they started so high.
Yeah, Oregon might see Washington again, though. Like,
there's a chance that these two play.
If both teams went out, they're playing each other in the Pac-12 championship, and all Oregon, because they lost to Washington already, all they'd have to do though is win that game. Like, because an early season loss against the same team, when you get to turn around and win the conference over them, that loss to Washington essentially probably wouldn't matter. You have a way to right the ship, and it was a close loss. And I really think if Oregon and Washington played today, I think Oregon wins by double digits.
Oregon a few times this season has been the best team I've seen in the country. There's been like 3 of the games they've played. They're that week. I was like, that's the best team in the country. I agree. I watched the Washington game and it happened. Washington looked great. I think just my gut reaction is that Oregon can step it up a little more on defense than Washington. I don't even know if that's really true. Just every now and then I'm like, it feels like they can get after it a little bit more, especially like probably I just got the Utah game in my mind freshly. And I'm like, okay, they got after it physically.
Oregon's so physical though.
Like, I think that's what I'm saying. I feel that they're more physical. Yeah.
Like they sent that message like, and they what's crazy is like they win if they play in Oregon, not in Washington. Like if the game wasn't in Seattle, Oregon wins. Like, and it's not like, I think that was a game when it's a toss up. A lot of times, usually you'll just say the home team gonna win. Like you feel more comfortable. It was such a close game, and I think things go your way a little more at home. It's different. You're not playing against the crowd. So I think like if they played today at Oregon this time, like I think Oregon wins the game. So they were kind of that even, but I think since Washington beat Oregon, it seemed like they took their foot off the gas as opposed to Oregon. It made them hungrier. And like, you've seen how physical they could be. And when they send a message, you saw what they did to Colorado a few weeks ago. Like when they're out for blood and trying to prove a point, they don't just play and win and it looks great. They physically are like, beating teams down, like Utah and Colorado, and who I forget who they played right after they lost to Washington. But like you could tell, like no, it means like I don't know. It just they've really.
I totally agree. I think they got a great head coach. I like that guy so much. I like the team. I guess I kind of want them to be in the playoffs just because I really think that they got a shot at it. I would love this for to be a year from now to where we're talking about Washington, Oregon, both getting a shot at it. Texas, I'd like to see have a shot at it. So before we have the High State conversation, or I'll say the number one conversation, it happens to be a High State. It's just the way it worked out, people. Me and Mo don't get a vote. And I promise you that me and Mo, did not want to see them at number one, and B, do not think that they're the best team in the country, but we'll have a discussion of why they're number one here in a second. So, outside of like Ohio State, Michigan, we talked about it, Georgia, Florida State, we think 3 of that combination is going to go. And so that pretty much what we think is it's either going to be one of the Big 12 teams, Texas or Oklahoma, or one of the Pac-12 teams, which I feel personally more that Oregon is the 4th team right now. Who do you think that's outside of today's top 4 is going to be in the playoffs?
Bama.
So you're saying Georgia loses?
Yes.
You're giving Georgia a loss. Okay.
In the SEC championship.
In the SEC championship game. Okay. So does Georgia get in?
That's where I think Bama getting in makes way more chaos because now who doesn't? Like now you're having that conversation. There's a 1-loss Georgia team who didn't win their conference, but are they better than Oregon? Like if Oregon's 1 loss still wins the Pac-12, like at the end of the day, like conference championship is supposed to be a plus, but you're saying they say the 4 best teams barely losing to Bama. Like is Oregon better than Georgia?
And we're saying at that point, Georgia's best win would be Missouri. It'd
be Missouri or Ole Miss because
that's true. That's true. Actually, that's the thing about, and I don't know if you want to like. I don't know. I know how you feel about the SEC. You grew up in SEC country. I'm not even saying I argue with these rankings, but what I will say is that when teams from a conference get ranked higher, Georgia's schedule is going to look better at the end of it than they did at preseason. Now, I don't know how good Ole Miss is. I don't know how good Missouri is. I think they are both pretty good teams. I don't have a problem with it. Big Ten's kind of been that way over the last few years. Like Ohio State's getting a lot of credit for beating Penn State. I honestly don't know if Penn State's a good football team or a really good football team, but they're getting credit for beating them. So I want to say that like I feel the same way about the benefit of the doubt that the Big Ten's gotten in the last few years also. But at the end of the year, Georgia will have had beaten the number 12 team, and we'll just assume that Ole Miss is number 10. They'll have a win against 12 and a win against 10, plus their big names. They'll have the Florida win. So and they'll have just come off a 20 at that point, almost a 30-game win streak. I don't see how you can keep the defending national champs assuming they're healthy, and that means at quarterback basically. I think Georgia still gets in, so then we're back to. But then I can't imagine this committee coming out and telling us that Georgia and Alabama are both in after how fantastic a college football season it's been. But then I guess it doesn't matter because we're going to 12 teams next year. So it's kind of a weird thing. I just don't know if two teams from a conference need in unless they really look the part.
I think it's possible, and for the simple fact,
I think it is possible.
I don't think you give, and I know people say it probably wouldn't matter, and it's not supposed to based on their policies and what they sell us, but if you had an opportunity to not have the Pac-12 in there on their last time while Oregon and Washington, because like really, like, you know,
wow,
the
I
Pac-12,
hadn't even thought about that.
this was their last year, and we're like, oh my God, like how come some TV network didn't come save this, and that's why you lost Washington and Oregon and USC and UCLA, like they're going to the Big Ten and all that stuff. So now, like, would that be the thought process? Like, man, I don't. Pac-12, if it's Georgia or Oregon, man, Pac-12 ain't even going to be existing. We're going.
Which way does it go, though? Does it go the other way with Oregon coming into the Big Ten and the Big Ten Network and Fox being involved? Does it go the other way of being like, we would love to be able to say that, you know, going into next season, the Big Ten has, you know, Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, like all these playoff teams. Like, does it? I suppose it could go the other way. I don't know.
It could go either way.
I see your point, though. That is a valid point. That this is the end of the Pac-12. What a weird what a weird finish.
And this is where they decide to be the best conference in the country. Like this is the first time where you're like, man, the Pac-12's played.
Pac-12 football is really good.
Like, top to bottom, do they win a lot of games against, like, if you match up their best teams versus the SEC and go, probably not, but just as a conference and where they've been at, like they've played the most competitive football, and they got the biggest games coming up when you think about it. Like there's a lot of games in the Pac-12 that you can't wait to see.
Well, I mean, they got the number one pick, the 2024's NFL's number one pick, and that team is struggling. That's how good the Pac-12 is.
Yeah, that's true too.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, and again, we're saying all this, we understand. I had a comment. I talked to Walker earlier on the network, and he's like, one of the biggest things is everybody, if you don't like where your team's ranked, everybody says, oh, it'll just play itself out. Like that's always the thing. It's like, oh, it'll play itself out. Like, well, we know, but that's like,
that's boring. Like, let's have a conversation.
If we were going to do that, we wouldn't watch until the last game of the season and be like, oh, who won? Like, nobody's going to do that.
Like, who ended up getting in? Now it's my time. Like, and then you don't just have these hypothetical conversations.
And that's no fun.
Yeah, that's boring. Like, we could just have a show Overreacted, be like, well, it all work itself out, Jeff. Everybody's mad Ohio State's number one. Maybe we're right, maybe they're wrong, but I'll talk to you later. Yeah, man. Like, that's no.
But I'd originally said a few weeks ago, there's really only 9 teams that can make it. But I got the 14, even though I don't know if I count. I don't know. I guess Oklahoma, they need some help, but I don't know if Louisville can actually make it. I really don't know, but I guess if you let Cincinnati in a couple years ago, you almost have to kind of stick with it.
One thing is hoisting up. If things shake out the right way, hoisting up that ACC championship, beating Florida State could mean a lot.
Yeah, it's true. Florida State
would mean a lot that week, because you'd have
we haven't even talked about Florida State. Like, let's talk about we got a few minutes left here. We've talked about the also rans and everything. Let's talk about the top 4.
Yeah, I figured we were going to get to them when it.
Yeah, let's get. Yeah, you're. I think it's time. Let's talk about the top 4 here. Let's go with Florida State. Like, how do you feel? We'll just go 4-3-2-1. Easy enough. I don't know if you've ever heard of this Ohio State team or not, but when we get there, I'll walk you through it. Yeah. Florida State. How do you feel about them as far as how good they are right now? And I mean, actually, like where they're at in the country, and then their chances to, I'll just say, either go to the playoffs or win it all, however you want to.
The same way I used to feel about Clemson. It's the same thing. Like, it's literally the same. Is like, you're gonna get there because you are. Like, they're on par with some of the upper echelon. Now, granted, they should have lost the game, but it ain't like they were able to steal one. And who was that? Boston College wasn't able to capitalize, but they should have lost that game. But hey, all that matters is the win column or the lack of the loss column, because you don't have one. But they're not a team I'm fully going to buy into until I see what you look like against them top teams. They don't even have a tough game on their schedule. Like, who do they? Okay, they beat LSU. That's cool. Early in the season as well. I don't think LSU is the same team. a lot of times those, but even still, I'll give you credit for that because LSU is what, 14? So you beat the number 14 team. Outside of that, though, who have they played that's supposed to wow me or impress me? It's just like Clemson every year. We'll be like, you got the talent where you're more talented than literally everybody else in your conference, but we got to see what you look like in the playoffs because you're really not throughout the regular season impressing.
And I think
Miami stinks. Florida, I guess if they beat Florida, cool. Clemson's bad. Like Clemson has 4 losses now. Like they don't have a game. And I mean, okay, beating Duke, cool, but
Clemson's 4-4.
Yeah, like this
Clemson's 4-4.
And
that's crazy.
You blitzed LSU first game of the season. Like you were able to blitz them, and I mean, it's
which
hard.
That counts because honestly, like to be fair, I think Notre Dame's a better team than Ohio State played. Ohio State's probably better than Notre Dame played. I get it goes both ways, but like you got to play a team when you play them. Like I agree with what you're saying, and I do agree with how much weight do you put in these early season games, and that's why I've always said that like stop putting out preseason rankings, stop all that until like we get to this time of year. And I kind of agree with you on Florida State. The one that gets me is that Duke game. Man, it's one of those games like, man, I feel like Duke beat them. And I know they didn't, and I know it doesn't count, but man.
Didn't their backup quarterback play in that game too?
Most of it, yeah. If Leonard stays in, most people agree. I'll just say it would have been a closer game because I don't want to be that guy that says, oh, they definitely would have won because everything's different, But I think Florida State totally deserves to be number 4. I don't think, and I'll be fair when we get up the list. I don't think Florida State's better than like Oregon right now, but I think they're better than, I think them and Alabama are probably right there as far as like, that would come right down to the end of it if they played Bama right now. So I think they're still solidly a top 8 team and definitely deserve the ranking they got. But I don't know if I feel like that I think because they're in the ACC, like they're in good shape. But I don't know when the playoffs start. And if they played Georgia tomorrow, I don't know what I think their chances would be.
Yeah, and the LSU loss can them beating LSU, like Bama could very well. I mean, if they blow out LSU, like your wins, your strength of wins start to look worse later on in the season. Like
absolutely.
Now you beat LSU, but like that's your strongest win, and they're a 3-loss team. Like they lost you and 2 other teams. So your strongest win just think about it. Notre Dame drops one more game. That game isn't valued the same.
Yep.
Michigan beats dogs Penn State.
Yep.
You look at that.
We're getting there. We're getting there.
So like it's just your strong wins can look a lot worse later on down the season because everything is going
to definitely deserve to be top 4, but they also they're not perfect. But you know what? Washington's the same way at 5. So I think they deserve to be ahead of Washington. I guess honestly, Washington beating Oregon to me is a better win than Florida State beating LSU. But I think we're looking at LSU the last 3 weeks and giving Florida State a lot of credit. And like you said, that's not the team they beat. Again, it is what it is. But there you go. So I guess my team for the benefits, Florida State being in the top 4 because they've stamped them with that win. And unless Alabama, I don't think even Alabama beating the brakes off LSU, the committee in the past has not typically taken that credit away from a team. We'll see how it goes if that happens. It'll be really interesting to see if they stick to their word. Because in theory, if Oregon looks great and LSU gets trashed, they really ought to jump Washington over Florida State if they're sticking to their word, but they won't. And I don't really want them to, but so it'll be interesting.
Florida State in. If Florida State wins out, they're in.
I think so. Oh yeah, I think an undefeated Florida State's in, no question.
If they would have put them at 5 and they would have put Washington at 4, I think you have a different conversation. I really do.
Fair.
Like being 4, I think you're stamped. That the committee told you, hey, you went out, you win your conference,
you're in.
You're in.
Yep.
So just don't lose.
So we'll go to number 3, which is weird to say, and that's the Michigan Wolverines. And it's odd to say it because almost everybody across the board, from top to bottom, agrees that Michigan is either 1 or 2 in the country because they've just lawnmowered over all their opponents. The other side of it is they have not played a high quality team yet. They would admit that. Everybody admits that. There's nothing we can do about it. The numbers all say that. The strength of schedule, everything. But who's been put in front of them? They've mashed. But also, who's been put in front of them? Most people have mashed. So it's like the Michigan Wolverines obviously control everything. They win, they're in. They they got the quarterback, position kind of right after the last couple years of that being, the one thing. They still got the running game, solid defense all across the board. They've got a great team. All the numbers back it up. The only thing is nobody in the country really cares what they've done yet. I think this is the least interesting good team so far because they've still got Penn State and Ohio State and I believe Wisconsin on their schedule.
Nah,
So
I
it's
think
like
they got Wisconsin, actually. Yeah, they don't play Wisconsin this
they
year.
don't even got Wisconsin. So it's
No,
like
they don't.
they've still got and then like I say, we're putting a lot in Penn State, Penn State's, piggy bank as far as like how good we feel they are. But it's like we just haven't seen him do anything. And everybody knew that going into the season that this was the schedule they were going to have, much like Georgia. Like Georgia didn't have a super hard, especially out of conference schedule. So like that's why Michigan is 3. I know what everybody's saying. Michigan's beat the number 1 team, this week's number 1 team twice. We all see that, but
That's not supposed to matter though.
exactly. The committee said, we know you're really good, but we have to see you play somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So I think again, Michigan's the same way as Florida State. When you're in, it doesn't even matter. None of it matters. Michigan wins, they're in. I don't think that what's going on around the program had any effect on. I think they were the solid number 3 all season, these rankings when they came out because of Ohio State's win over Notre Dame and Penn State. Georgia was going to get the benefit. I don't think you can't put them above Georgia when Georgia has at least beat a team with a name. Like, I'm sorry, but you can put up some serious stats against, what was it? UNLV, Hawaii, stuff like that. So
yeah, they've beaten some bad teams.
As much as we don't want to talk about it, but we're pros here. This is a college football show, not a Buckeye show. How do you feel about Michigan Wolverines for the rest of the season?
I think they're where they should be. I mean, because like you would have been setting a precedent if you would have had Michigan over Ohio State. Like you may think they're better, and they might be. Like they probably will be. You probably be like, if they played today, but that's not what they're supposed to be based on. The rankings are not supposed to really be based on if they played today. Who am I taking? Let alone their strength of schedule has been absolutely horrible, and you've throughout the rankings consistently, if you put Texas over Oklahoma. So if you would have did that and then turn around and put Michigan at number 1, then you would have been sending mixed messages because if wins matter, Texas is over Oklahoma. That's fine. But you'd have to stay consistent because if you're saying wins matter for Texas beating Alabama, but like Ohio State having played Notre Dame on the road and Penn State at home, playing Penn State at home, but winning those 2 games, who you have both, I think, in the top 15, 16, and then Michigan hasn't played any of that. Their best win is Rutgers at home. Like that's Michigan's best win. Rutgers is a 2-loss team. Michigan's best win is Rutgers at home early in the season. Everybody else played as bad.
A quick follow-up question, the Michigan situation. So let's say Ohio State would have lost either one of those games, Penn State if they'd have lost to Penn State. Yeah, let's say Ohio State would have lost to Penn State. And then, so that would make Penn State undefeated right now. Would they be ahead of Michigan, or would Michigan have jumped to like number 1 or number 2? Like, what Ohio State has done, if they didn't beat Notre Dame or whatever, would that have changed where they put Michigan? I think it kind of would have, because I think what you just said is the exact conversation they had in that room, Mose. Which why should we should be in that room, by the way. I think they said, well, wait a minute. We can't put Michigan number 1 and tell Ohio State, like, we don't care what you did this season, because those two are, no matter what it is, for 100 years, they're linked at the hip. It just is what it is. Sometimes so I wonder what effect that had on putting Michigan at 3. And it's the same way with Georgia, Alabama. They're linked at the hip. Like those 2 teams, like, one does this one. You're always looking forward to like the future, confrontation. So I think that actually Ohio State being undefeated, exactly what you said. I don't think they could put Michigan up there, even though I think they wanted to. I think if Ohio State had lost to Notre Dame, Michigan would be number 1 in the first rankings.
Oh, 100%. Really do. But if you would have put Michigan over Ohio State right now, you would have had to put Oklahoma over Texas.
There you go. Then, once you start that precedent, you're like,
yeah.
And then plus you're saying we don't care about who you play. That's what you would have said.
But that would have
been. Then honestly, if you put Michigan at 1, you have to put Louisville, or you have to move Louisville up. You have to move like Air Force up, because you're saying we don't care.
And it'd be fine. It'd be like whatever precedent they set, just set it consistently, but you couldn't have like, okay, Michigan's number one, but then you got Texas over Oklahoma. Well,
right.
they play head to head. So what are you saying? But now you've told
Right.
us you value up to this point. First ranking, I value who you beat.
I think they played it safe on the Big Ten teams. Okay, number 2, Georgia. This won't. I don't think this takes a lot of time. They've had about 3 games this year to where they look like world beaters. I'll be honest with you. The film looks great. They're still super physical, both sides of the ball. I still think they're the best as far as like talented defense and scheme defense in the country. Like when they turn it up a notch, like they look like an NFL defense out there. I know they've slowed down. There's they got a new quarterback this year, like a lot of these teams do, like Ohio State does, like Alabama does. But I think Georgia's still fine because when they concentrate and they're at their best, I think they can beat anybody. And I think I have no problem. I know they're supposed to start from scratch. They keep telling us to start from scratch every week. There's no way you can overlook a 2-time national champ that hasn't lost a game in over 2 years. I feel fine about Georgia, regardless of schedule, but I do know that this also puts them in a great situation as far as they can afford to lose a game. How do you feel about the Georgia Bulldogs?
I thought they'd be number 1. Like I thought they'd be 1, Ohio State would be 2, Michigan would be 3.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of where I thought they were going to go with that. But I mean, so it's like, I'm not mad, Georgia, I thought they were going to be 1 just because you could tell me that, hey, the past 2 years don't matter, but like you still get to weigh 2-time back-to-back national champ is still undefeated.
Yeah.
It's got a nice enough ring to sell me that they're still the best team in the country. So,
and their quarterback's playing better.
Yeah, he's gotten better every week. Like
I wish if Bowers wasn't hurt, I would have them clear favorites. But I think they can be beat as opposed to last year. But man, when I watch them and they're playing good, I'm like, I don't know how you beat them. I don't know. I mean, I think you got to get tip balls and interceptions and fumbles and I guess we saw it last year, like what can happen in one game, but they're tough. All right, here we go. Number 1 team in this week's first initial, 2023 playoff rankings was the Ohio State Buckeyes. Slightly surprising. They've got the best resume in the country. They have a very good team. Their defense is much better, which was what everybody was waiting on. Their quarterback's worse. They got Marvin Harrison Jr., Heisman contender. Biletnikoff, probably they might as well just mail it to him now. But they're number 1 in this week. They still the gorilla in the room is they still have Michigan at the end of the season, who they've lost to 2 years in a row. But they gave them what the committee said was, we're going to give you credit for beating what we think are really good teams. And so there they are sitting at number 1 in the country. How do you feel about your Ohio State Buckeyes being ranked number 1?
We're supposed to be. We are where we are supposed to be. And I know I'm going to make people upset with that one. I don't care. And my thing is this. We got the best resume as of right now. Had you have put Georgia number 1, like I said, I'd have been perfectly fine with that. I would be. We were 2, I'm cool. My thing is we have the best resume. And here's the thing is, like, you're going to sell me on Kyle McCord. Like, you're going to sell me that Kyle McCord is not a good quarterback. And then all these other teams that you say will beat us, you're going to sell me on them. But, like, Wonder Boy Sam Hartman looked absolutely terrible against our defense. We made him look bad. Wonder Boy that was supposed to save Penn State's program, Drew Allar. Our defense is more than good. We have a great defense this year.
Yeah.
And that's something that you're not used to with Ohio State as far as winning games defensively. Usually 2019, we had a great defense just like this. Actually, our numbers this year are a little bit better. But at the same time, we scored a lot of points while doing that too. You look and it's 60-something to 7. Jesus, we've done it in a lot uglier of ways and had to pick wins off however we can. Last minute, Marvin Harrison Jr., whatever it may be. But you'll try and tell me that Ohio State's not the best team in the country, but then can't tell me you can't have that conversation without saying anything other than Kyle McCord. And then you're going to turn around and tell me, well, Georgia, and then you're going to say Carson Beck. Well, Michigan, because then you're going to say J.J. McCarthy. Like, you're not even going to be talking about all these world beater quarterbacks while telling me, yes, we have a Kyle McCord problem. We could use an upgrade at quarterback, but we don't. And we also went into the season thinking we would have a quarterback problem and give up a lot of points. We have the best team in the country. At least I put it like this: of the schools that matter, we got the best defense of all the schools that matter. And I'm not sure how close it is statistically. And even if you say, well, you haven't played a Caleb Williams or something, well, y'all people thought Sam Hartman was going to be in the Heisman conversation,
Sure.
and Drew Allar was supposed to. Hey, he's the reason why James Franklin. Hey, he finally has a quarterback. This is the most talented team James Franklin has. This is his highest chance of beating Ohio State. He's only done it once while being at Penn State. Doesn't happen, and now you spend time telling me that it's those guys aren't as good when you were building them up to be able to beat us, and our defense made them look bad. I just had to throw that little rant on that real quick.
No, you're right. It's always the thing of when Ohio State beats a team, then automatically that team got worse. But I think the committee said, no, we think Penn State's good. We think Notre Dame's good. That's the bottom line. And I do too. We saw what Notre Dame has crushed some good teams. Penn State is a very good team and a good defense. McCord just made the top quarterback, watch list. Like that's a real thing. Like he's definitely the how do you say this? He's the weak point of a really, really good team. And typically the quarterback's a strong point. Can Ohio State, here's the thing. I always look at teams this way, and I do this a lot with the NFL. I look at how many teams can you beat? Ohio State can beat every team in the country. Maybe not every team at their absolute best. Like if Georgia's at their best, they can beat every team in the country. Michigan, we think can beat every team in the country. Ohio State's up there too. As to where like Tennessee, I don't know if you can beat every team in the country. Oregon, I think you can beat every team in the country. Washington, I'm pretty sure, but that's what I mean. I'm with you. Like, and then you throw in the resume, like you're the ones that told us how good these teams were. Ohio State took care of business. People have a lot of faith in their defense, and it's not just people either. I mean, like I said earlier, Vegas also has a lot, which they're not in the business of losing money, so they see something too. Do I personally think right now, this weekend, Ohio State can beat every team in the country? No, but that's not this weekend. The playoffs don't start this weekend. They've got time. McCord's got time. Like he's shown that he's grown a little bit. He's not making stupid mistakes. Like he's good enough. And maybe he's got that in him. You know what I mean? Maybe he's got that one game in him, but what I do know is the kid's not throwing away games. And that's not every quarterback in the country can say that.
But he doesn't throw away games because of how good our defense is. Because if our defense wasn't that good, we lose to Wisconsin. He would have threw that game away.
Like he did try to throw away the Wisconsin game. I 100% agree.
Yeah, like if we don't have one of the best defenses or arguably the best defense in the country, like we lose that game. A fumble and 2 interceptions in the first half, you throw us out of that game. But because we got such a defense, you can afford to make some mistakes now.
That was a weird game.
You can't do it against Michigan. But at the same time,
I'll tell you something about Wisconsin too that I saw. Wisconsin found their quarterback. Like that's their quarterback. That kid's got everything, all the potential in the world. Yeah, he's young, but there was flashes there that I'm like, oh, this kid's fine. Like Wisconsin and Fickle are going to be fine going into the next season. Big Ten's going to be so good next year. It's ridiculous with Oregon, Jeff, Washington.
I do want to throw shade real quick too.
Okay,
not to beat on his rankings, but he didn't put it in the chat, and so I'm just anybody who is thinking like Stu and want to come out with their own rankings and put Ohio State at 5, you're drunk. I'm sorry. There's no way Ohio State's the 5th best team, and all you're going to say is you're going to beat up on Kyle McCord in order to say why Ohio State's not as good, but then you're going to leave out the fact they're one of the best defenses. They made all your wonder boys that you thought were going to be great is great, and I'm sorry, like you're going to tell me Ohio State when they got the best resume, you're going to put them at 5. Washington almost lost to Arizona. Washington, okay, they beat Oregon. That's fine, but they've had some close calls. They almost coughed up a game. See, you be missing them because it's Pac-12 after dark most of the time, but they almost coughed one up the other night. So to put them at 5, I think is crazy. And all it is you're just going to be, at that point, you're just comparing quarterbacks. If you think Ohio State is the 5th best team in the country, you're just comparing quarterbacks. And you're like, of the 5 undefeateds, I like Kyle McCord the least, and that's why they're 5. That's literally the only conversation.
Well, and here's what I always said as someone that lived through, I've lived through a lot of years of football. In defense of these teams like that, like winning a game by 14, even if it's, whether it's 24-10 or whether it's 35-21 or however, it's still the same, like difference. It's a little different today's game when a team's not scoring 50. So I see some of it. But I also like, as far as like the rankings go, you have to rank a team where they've earned to be ranked. Because if you're not going to do that, then what's the sense in playing the season out? So I do agree with some of that.
Yeah, just putting them at 5, like it's just at the end of the day, like they're not the 5th best team in the country, and I'm not taking all 4 of the undefeateds behind them. They're not all beating Ohio State. Like, even if you want to weigh it that way,
I think Ohio State would have beat Florida State most weekends,
and I think they would have beat Washington most weekends. Like, because my thing is that explosive offense stuff that everybody thinks is going to walk in here. Like, I know, but every time you thought those guys were going to walk in there and hey, they're better offensively and like the Sam Hartman's doesn't throw for 200 yards. Drew Allah looks like Penn State. Like, now we're saying, oh, Penn State maybe didn't find their quarterback, as opposed to giving the credit that Ohio State's defense is just that good.
I think Tungavaloa had well under 100 yards in the second half. Like, yeah, like I say, I kind of, again, I'm with you. Ohio State's, they're a top 4 team right now. So wherever they got laid in, I really didn't care. I don't think you could have put them behind. I don't know. I don't even really care, honestly. Like, if you'd put Florida State ahead, they're a top 4 team. That's saying they're in right now. And here's the thing we know. I'll put my Ohio State hat on for a second. We also know that with the brand, it doesn't matter. If Ohio State wins out, they're in. Nothing like it. Like, they're never going to start the season and have to fight their way in and argue. Like, if they win, they're in. The big boys, Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, those teams win, they're in. Like, the other ones are splitting hairs, but Ohio State's fine. Does the first week, we know that the first week of rankings are going to change. It doesn't matter, but it does start putting pressure on it. It does give you a path. Now now teams know the path. I think that's what I like about the actual rankings, instead of worrying about the AP poll and all that. Like, now we're like, the committee has at least told you something. We know they're going to do the exact opposite next week. Somebody's going to have a close game and win, and they're going to punish them for it. It's not going to make any sense. But as long as here's what helps Ohio State this season, and anybody else that plays them, as long as the committee is still in love with like Notre Dame, Penn State, you get so much credit. Watch if LSU beats Alabama, what happens. Like, the committee loves certain wins. Ohio State's the benefit of it this year because they had Notre Dame on the schedule. It's plain and simple. That's the difference in the season. And we said that going into it. The difference in the season was Notre Dame football.
Yeah, and we walked in knowing, like, everybody who knew Ohio State had 3 games on their schedule marked, and be like, these 3 games determine our season. That's it. Yeah. Notre Dame, Penn State, and the fact of being 8-0, now you feel like you're going to walk into what pretty much at this point everybody hoped. You're going to walk into that Michigan game unscathed. Yep. We get to see number 1 versus 2 or 2 versus 3 or wherever they're sitting at. Yep. But we get to see that again, and you made it past 2 of your 3 toughest games. You got 1 more. Like, don't hiccup on the way there. The Lord handed you a way to go to the college football playoffs, and we're not worried about you beat Wisconsin. I ain't worried about nobody else on the other side of the Big Ten. You go and complete your 3rd task, beat Michigan, you're in the playoffs because you're going to win the Big Ten. You're going on to compete for the national championship.
Like I say, all the big boys have put themselves right where they want to be. Even Alabama. Alabama's like, we're good. Like, just got to win. We get. There's about 6 teams that just have to win out.
It's painted that clear. Just win.
All right, Mo Murphy. That was a blast. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being my producer. It was good to be back. I felt pretty good. I think I settled in. Pretty good back in the chair. Stumbled through it a little bit, had some technical problems early, but just so everybody knows, obviously go check out Up in Flames with my man. Go check out Off the Ball Network, everything we're doing over there. Keep up with everybody. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Anything you can do to help print out a ton of content right now during football season. NBA season is ramping up. It's getting kind of crazy. So I want to thank everybody for joining in. Thank everybody for listening. We're going to try to do this again. I can't promise you we'll do it every week of the rankings, but I'm going to try. And then as my show eases back in, I'll try to do some more. So Mo, thanks for being on. Thanks for doing this for me, man.
Yeah, of course. And we will catch y'all hopefully next week.
Yes, let's